What's up, y'all? We have another pedal, and it is from Warm Audio, actually, which is cool. Love Warm Audio and all their stuff that they have. But this one is near and dear to me because I love compressors. So they like full sent it into a big old 1176 compressor in pedal format. I mean, look at that thing, dude. It's a monster, which, you know, guitar players might be a little afraid of because they're always trying to make space on their boards, but you can't deny that this is sweet. And there's a couple of goodies and functions here on the back side as well, which is rad. I mean, you have like an input trim and, you know, an option for a buffer and things like that. But this is sweet, dude. I mean, I love 1176 style compressors, you know, usually in studio format. There are some pedal format, you know, options like the Cali 76. I know plenty of people that love that pedal. I never personally fully bonded with it, but it is cool nonetheless. So it is really cool to see that we have, I don't want to say competitor, we just have an alternate option here that is likely going to give us some very different character and a few different options as well. Like I was talking about, you know, the input trim and stuff, which I'm really interested about. The input here on the front that says input/comp, it's a sort of crossover between more input signal, but also lowering the threshold. And so there is that, but then you have that independent control to actually seemingly feed it more signal in the back. I say seemingly because I haven't used it yet. That is usually some of the fun for me. I've literally never played it. I have no idea what to expect. So we're going to play it live together for the first time and just discover the pedal. This is also going to be a really big challenge. One of my favorite and most important pieces of gear on my board is my compressor, the Tone Press, which is, as many of you know, housed in a different box that I had my buddy label Creed. But it's just, I'm so attached to it and the tone that it has. It's a parallel compressor as well. So this will be really fascinating to see not how, I keep saying not compete, because I really am not interested for everything to compete and be better than or something. I just simply recognize that a lot of stuff can have a different goal and purpose. And so I'm really excited to see what this sounds like. We have a ratio control. We have attack and release. You know, a lot of classic controls. We have output, and then we have input/compression, which is, like that crossover I was just talking about. But I think it's worth actually me pulling up some of the descriptions of the pedal because they had some like really cool info on what's going on the inside, which is important. Unlike the currently available Cali 76 small format compressor pedal and closer to their original larger format products, Pedal 76 has a studio grade custom Cinemag transformer that adds rich analog tone to the output section of the pedal, added grit from the FET. The rich character of the transformer and critical gig-ready controls make Pedal 76 an ideal choice for creating timeless studio sound on stage. So I think that was the thing that I was looking for, the Cinemag transformer. I'm curious to see what we can do to kind of like musically make some really cool things happen with that. So I think without further ado, let's, dive right in and see what it sounds like, because I don't really have much else to say since I haven't played it yet and we will experience it live. The only one thing I will say is, obviously, as we looked at, it's big. It's big for especially like a compressor, but not if it sounds really good. You can always make space for something that sounds really good. All right, so here is the Pedal 76. I mean, the knobs are just kind of an absolute random location, so it's going to take us a moment to probably get things, in a normal place. But at the moment, I didn't change that input trim pot on the back, and I just figure we'll go with it exactly as it is for now. There is the buffer button that I'm curious about, kind of what that's doing. So once we get it to a sort of like normal place, we'll mess with that buffer switch and just kind of see if we like it or not. Okay, so without doing anything except for turning up the input like a lot, cool. Which obviously the input is not necessarily exactly what you want to turn up exclusively. You have the whole output section here. And it's worth remembering here that this is just clean tone. So any amount of grit or aggression and stuff is just kind of like output happening from the Pedal 76, which is cool because so far it's very punchy and we've hardly changed anything, let alone like attack, which actually, so it looks like attack is fast on the right. So that's good. Generally, I would probably want to do something like that with the release being a little slower. Let's try fast on both of them. Sweet. So, we've been kind of just tinkering for a moment just to get acquainted. And so far, so good. I mean, we're hearing some of that saturation from the compression itself, not necessarily from hitting the amps harder. That's what some of that sort of fluttery grit is that is within the squeeze of the guitar, which is cool. I mean, it feels very familiar from, using different Studio 1176 compressors before, and that's really cool. So let's keep messing with ratio while we've got these settings like this. It's really cool. So what happened there was, first of all, I backed off the input. I wanted to see it start to kind of pump the fader and not just always be maxed out, slamming the front end of the compressor. And so we made it kind of pulse a little bit more, but then it felt like the guitar was just a little too wide open, which is great if you want things to be very punchy and rhythmic. But the reality is like in my cleans, I want to hear some of that kind of slap on the attack of the note of the guitar because it's a feel thing for me, but I still want it to be dynamic. And so I increased the input a little bit. I slowed the release. By slowing that release there, it was making it not so immediate on letting go. And so it kind of just, it keeps the compressed qualities on the guitar a little bit more once it's quickly attacking. Now, the one thing I want to highlight as well right away is that with quick attack, it's not giving you that really annoying sort of poppy attack. Like whenever you hit the note, I've heard so many of them before that it's just like slapping the compressor really, and it just makes a really odd percussive sound that isn't awesome. This is not doing that. It's very gentle and it's very forgiving so far, which is really cool. With these settings, this is feeling pretty decent. Let's keep messing with ratio now. Because I don't know if you noticed earlier when we messed with ratio, it was really impacting how much top end clarity was coming through, which is really cool. And then the more you kind of squashed it, it did tame that a bit, which, if you're dealing with single coils and you want to have something that can sort of tame the top end, that could be that for you. And if you're using humbuckers like I am, you can open it up a little bit by lessening the ratio. Okay, that's really cool. That is starting to feel very familiar to me from the tone press, which is very enlightening that perhaps it's not an immediate attack, because the immediate attack, while nice in some ways, on the front end of your guitar, like being a pedal on your board, it does absorb some of the attack. You notice how it basically is kind of going mwah, mwah, instead of like having the kind of more open percussive. That right there. And so let's put it back. So that's sitting more on top of my guitar. So it's really cool that you can open it up just enough to get your percussion back. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn on my first gain stage. I want to see how it sort of interacts with drives like this so far. And right now, our ratio is roughly at noon. It's just under, like 1145, which appears to be somewhere around like a ratio of like 10 to 1. So it's interacting so differently than how I'm used to the tone press working for me, and means nothing negative whatsoever. It's just cool how much more finite control you have. You're very much dissecting every piece of the compression availability in this. Minute changes to the knobs on the top can make some of the most drastic changes. I don't want to say that to scare you off. It's just it speaks to so much flexibility. So one thing I'm also curious about here, I'm going to turn my first gain stage off, and we talked about the buffer. We've gotten it into like an interesting sort of well-rounded set of settings here so far, and I want to keep exploring, but I'm curious what that buffer is going to do when we swap it on and off. Okay, and that was definitely not as easy to get as I thought, which is no biggie. I just needed to grab one of my small screwdrivers. It's not like on the outside of the back. You need something that you can kind of reach in and flip the switch. All right, so here is buffered. And then the buffer turned off. And then back on. I mean, I can't say that I don't like it. It's definitely giving me a sort of like richness, a sort of clarity. That could change depending on environment or like preamps you're on or the way your guitar is getting mixed perhaps. But at least at the moment, the sort of presence it's giving, I don't hate. There's a certain size my tone has when it's not on because it's not, boosting any kind of top end qualities or something, but there is a richness that is really charming about it. Well, cool. Now that we mess with that, let's keep kind of messing with some settings here. That's really interesting. And let's mess with release and like really drop it here. Cool. Now that we've done that, again, I'm actually going to swap to the buffer back off. As I'm really leaning into it, I think I'm noticing some pinchier top end qualities, which once again, I'm not going to say it's overall negative. It's just as the way it's interacting with my first gain stage, I'm just going to go with something that's more familiar at the moment in terms of tonal qualities. So I'm going to flatten it out. Cool. We are back off and let's hear it again. Cool. Yeah, I think that did remove that little tiny thing that I was hearing that, once again, not negative, just the way it's interacting with my drives right this second with this amount of output pumping into them. I think it was bringing out something that wasn't perfect, but I liked the richness of it and clean. So it's just like, if I were to spend more time with this, future tense, I'm sure I would land on somewhere that I would like with the buffer on, giving me that clarity, but also not doing those kinds of things in my drives. Now let's just see how it's interacting from clean tone to, being on and off essentially. Yeah, it's progressively getting more and more familiar sounding. I'm actually going to pump the input up a little bit more. Let's back off the threshold here a little bit. It really goes to a gentler form of compression when you drop that ratio, and then it really starts to squeeze as you raise it up. It's cool to hear how diverse that can be. I'm going to throw on my first gain stage. Very dynamic. That's super cool. Really loving that. It is definitely, fatter though, and hitting my drives a little harder. Let's drop that output a little bit. Okay, yeah, that's getting nicer. Let's really crank that ratio. Just changed over to the constant drive from my first gain stage. Cool. Okay, so that's maxed out ratio. As far as attack and release goes, this is feeling familiar. Like I've said many times now, and I think it's progressively getting more and more refined, which is awesome. The attack has gotten slower. Let's go ahead and raise it up a little bit. I'm curious to hear that with a little bit of effects. I mean, because that sounds really charming. It's really gentle. It's compressed really hard, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it's oversaturating too much from the compressor side. So obviously that was a longer section of just kind of turning little knobs to make subtle differences. And I think it's because, I know what I'm looking for, especially when certain, like my first gain stage was on that whole time, and then having a little bit of wet effects, and then knowing what I know I want it to do and seeing if it can do it. And it does seem like it can. I do think that there's still a little further refinement. I think the last thing I'm curious to mess with, because I think this has done a really great job at competing with something that has never been dethroned for me. And I'm finding that I think that I could, mess with it enough to get it to do what I love. But obviously, since it has so much variety, you can dial an enormous amount of options. And, I want to see, can it do and of course it can, but can it do my super squashed, super compressed thing that I love so much with slide? So let's go ahead and raise that ratio a ton. And the input's already pretty high. So let's just see what that's like. Yeah, the answer is yes, it can. There's just so much variety in how you can dial that thing. The more that we turned up the attack, you notice how it kind of latched onto the attack of the note. It softened it, and that in and of itself is a whole vibe. I would totally see myself doing that to bring out more of the harmonic howl and soften the attack of the guitar if I don't want to highlight that sound that, the picking is going to do on the string, and just soften it with a harder attack. So cool to have that flexibility. I think obviously it can do an enormous amount of things. I think it's proved itself here as a very versatile compressor pedal. I do love the harmonics it brings out. That is a really charming quality. I think it would just be me personally on my own time further dialing it to get it to 100%. And after messing with this, I think it's telling me that I know it can. And I just love that there's so much versatility in this that I can do so many other things and draw different qualities that I think maybe I couldn't before. So anyways, that's awesome. This is, I could just go on, and this video would be way too long. So that is the Warm Audio Pedal 76, and it's epic, man.